Hello, it's Spence, the evil genius, with your WordPress tip of the day. Hey, I got a really nice email from Sandy, who is building her site called digitalspeaking.net on responsive, or with the responsive theme on WordPress, I should say. And she wanted a little bit of help on how to modify her main menu bar. Now, I'm going to assume from her email that she'd like to know how to modify the look and feel, but the way it's written, she might actually want to know how to get rid of it. So I'm going to give you guys some tips either way, and this will be a great introduction into the ways that you can customize the responsive LabZip child theme, even if you're not familiar with CSS, right? Everything that we do here at 1WD is based on the notion that you don't have to know how to code it. You just have to understand the bigger concepts and know how to copy and paste. So let's jump right in and take a look at the browser. I want to start out. This is Sandy's site, Digitally Speaking. She's done a nice job. Actually put in a beautiful logo and some other header modifications. And it's basically built on the responsive theme, so that's terrific. Now, I'm going to assume that many of you who are watching this video for the first time have at least seen my videos that suggest that your modifications should always be done inside of a child theme and not to the parent theme. If, in fact, however, you're only doing CSS modifications, many of which I'm going to show you here, you don't necessarily need a child theme just for that. We can use a plugin that's a free plugin that'll allow you to add the CSS independently from the parent theme and thereby get many of the same benefits, which allow you, for example, to update the parent without concern over whether you lose your CSS, and also to be able to access the modifications out in the open, so you don't have to be digging around. So let's jump in with some concepts. The other tools that you're going to need, if you haven't done so already or used them before, is it would be very, very handy to have a standalone FTP client. I am using Transmit for Macintosh, but this could be a free FTP client. You could use something like FileZilla. You could always edit within WordPress, which I've shown you before, but it's nice to have a separate FTP client because this way you get access to the files in a little easier to access way. Let's just put it that way. To go along with your FTP client, you can choose a text editor, and I use several of them. My favorite is Sublime Text, which looks like this when it's empty. You can also use Smoltron, which is a second favorite of mine. I've got it here floating around my desktop. You can edit directly, again, inside of WordPress. Either way, your choice, but these are the main tools. Now, the next thing that you're going to need in order to succeed on the mods is either to be using the free Chrome Inspector or Safari Inspector, which is accessed by right-clicking when you're in Chrome browser, for example, and choosing Inspect Element. Same is true for Safari. If you choose to use Firefox, which is one of my favorite tools, then you can get the Firebug plugin, or extension, I should say, Firebug. And it's at getfirebug.com, and it's a free extension. It works independently. Let me scale that down. Works independently of the browser, but it's a nice built-in extension, or you can get the light version, which stands alone. Either way, it's going to have about the same outcome. I actually like Firebug when I'm working with Firefox for a couple of reasons, but since I'm in Chrome tonight, I'm just going to stick with Chrome. Your choice. So, what are we going to do? Well, basically, let's talk about two things. Number one, let's talk about how you can remove the menu if that was your choice. Now, there's two ways that you can remove the menu, and the reasons for that might be several. One of which is that Responsive has 4 menu areas on the home page. It has an upper menu in the top. It has the main menu here. It also has, although she doesn't show it, a drop-down menu. And let me show you what that looks like. If I go to our demo site, we can see here that I've got the main menu. But if I go into my dashboard, I can go under Appearance, Menus, and I can activate this secondary menu, right? And the way we're going to do that is simple. I go to Locations, and you see here there's Top Menu, which is what I just mentioned. There's the Header menu. There's the Subheader menu, and then there's a Footer menu. If I wanted to, I could select just an existing menu that I've already created, which is a duplicate of this, and I say Save Changes. So what I've effectively done is turned on not only the main header menu, but the subheader menu so that you can see what that looks like. So let's reload, and you can see it right here. It's white, it drops down. It's kind of convenient, it works in lots of ways. It's also responsive. So it will show up within the new responsive menu when you shrink the size of the browser or you're on a mobile device. And then there's a footer menu. We talked about that just a second ago. I could just show you all of these. Let's just go ahead and activate all of them. Actually, to make sure they all look the same, I'm going to add the same menu, the header menu, to all 4 locations. And let's take a look. Okay, so we got the header, we got the main menu, the sub menu, and we've got the footer. Now, the reason you might want to turn this off, or Sandy might want to turn it off, is maybe she just wants to use the header menu, or maybe just the footer menu. Whichever the case may be, it works fine. I've also got other tutorials where I've shown you how you can actually take the code from, let's say, the header menu and relocate it somewhere else. And I may even show you that here if I have a couple extra seconds. So let's show you how you can remove that. Well, there's a couple ways. First of all, the easiest way is code free. You don't need any code at all. How do you do that? Well, if we want to remove the main header menu, just deselect it. Deselect all of these. Let's see what happens when we deselect all of the header, top, sub, and footer menus from the Manage Locations area inside of Appearance menus. When we click Save Changes, reload, I'll just do this, I'll do Control R. This is what we get. Now, this is good and bad. It's good because we got rid of all the other menus, right? You see the footer's gone, the sub menu is gone, the top menu is gone. But we have a bit of a problem because by default, the responsive parent wants to make sure that people don't get confused when they first start using it. So it's got a default option that basically will show every single thing you've created so far on the site, even if that wasn't your goal for the menu. So how do we overcome it? How can we have a situation where this isn't the case? Well, let's go back here and we're going to turn on, let's say, the header menu in the top menu area and save that. When we reload, we've got a menu now. Okay, so the next step is let's use some simple CSS to hide the main menu. What we're going to do is right-click and inspect that area. Now, you don't have to be a coder. Remember, you don't even need to know a lot of CSS. I'm just going to show you how to do this, and you can do the same for yourself. When I move my mouse over the various elements in this markup, you can see various things are being highlighted, right? So the DOM structure here allows me to see, this is being covered by this class, the division class main nav. If I go up, I see the logo, I can see the top menu, the header, etc. So the goal here is we want to determine what's the largest element that contains the main menu that we can then hide. And in this case, I could feasibly stick with this unordered list with the class of menu. But the problem is that would leave me with the main navigation area still effectively defined. And that might cause a spacing issue because if I were to hide the unordered list for the main menu, it would probably work, but there's a chance that I might leave a gap between the logo and the next element below, the next piece of content. So I'm going to go for the bigger picture. I'm going to go up to the division with the class of main nav. Now you notice on the right hand side that we've got that defined in the main style sheet as, again, a class. So it starts with a period, main nav. And now what we can do with the inspector is to see what would happen if we were to hide it. How do we hide it? Well, over here in our inspector, let's make it a little bigger. I can just click and hit the enter button twice to make a new line. And now I'm going to type display, and then I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to say none. Look at that. Did you see how beautiful that is? I can see now that if I were to take the division with the class of main nav and I added the display none attribute, that it hides the main navigation menu. Next, I need to save this. I need to commit it to my CSS. So I'm just going to highlight that. I'm going to right click and copy. Now I'm going to go back to my main admin dashboard, and there's 2 places this could go. Remember I told you that. One is if you're using a child theme, which I happen to be using. I'm using the Responsive LabZip child theme. I can go under Appearance Editor, and I can go ahead and select the child theme here, which is the Responsive LabZip. In this case, it's the Responsive LabZip child theme. And then I'm going to click Select, and I'm going to scroll down to the LabZip custom CSS file. Now, if you have another type of child theme, and it might not be called LabZip Custom, it might be called style.css or custom or whatever it may be. If you made your own style sheet, you can name it anything you want as long as you're basically referencing it in the right way in the setup. In other words, when you make the child theme, if you have an extra child theme style sheet like this, you can name it whatever you want as long as it's being declared in the main style sheet. That part I know is just a little wishy-washy on it. Let's not worry about that for right now, because if worse comes to worse, I have a backup way for you to do this. So what we would do is, I have some other stuff in here which isn't important. I can go down a line or two. I'm going to paste in the class of main navigation, and I'm going to say DisplayNone. I'm going to update the file. So this is committing into the CSS. Now when I go back and refresh the page, it's stuck. So I know it works. And that is the simple way, using CSS, to do it with a child theme. But let's say we don't have a child theme, as I mentioned, but we just know that we're only doing CSS mods. Next way to do it is, let's remove this. We can use a special plugin. So I'm going to update the file so it no longer has the CSS in there. And just to prove to you that it's gone, you see the main menu is there. If you were to go over to plugins, installed plugins, you can add a plugin called Custom CSS. And actually it's called Simple Custom CSS. Let me scroll down. Here we go. Simple Custom CSS. And the way to add that for the first time is click on Plugins, Add New, and type in Simple Custom CSS. And you will find it in the WordPress repository for free. So you just would click the Install Now button. I've already installed it, so instead of it showing like this, it shows installed. Then it will be found under Appearance, Custom CSS. And what this does is gives you a special box that injects the CSS you add here into whatever the theme might be. So even though you're free to modify the parent theme and it won't override it, this CSS will affect the parent in the same way as if you added it via a child theme. So I add that CSS here. I go ahead and update it. And let's refresh the page and see if that works. And it does. So we've just shown you two ways to add some very basic CSS using your inspector, the CSS that you found with your inspector. And now you can affect a change on the site, in this case to hide the main navigation menu. Now let's talk about how we can modify the look and the feel instead. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that change. And let's go back and refresh. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that we've got a normal looking navigation menu so it looks a little bit more like Sandy's site here. So I'm going to go back under Appearance, Menus, and I'm going to, again, manage the location. I'm going to choose the header menu as the content for the header menu location. See, theme location, menu that's assigned. Refresh. Okay, now we've got a normal looking menu. So let's talk about how we can affect the style. Well, again, you know what's coming next, right? I'm going to right click on that area and click Inspect Element. Now here we actually do find ourselves using that unordered list with the ID of menu, menu header menu and the class of menu. And if we look to the right, we can see that the style is contained across both the class and the ID. What I mean is, we see here that in general, menu class has certain things like the display has got to be a block, the list style type is none, there's zero margin. When I scroll down, there's some additional styling, including some background images and colors that's also added to the menu class. And so, for example, we can turn on and off various attributes in order to determine what it is that we want to change. So if we were to take the background color, turn it on and off, that's there, it's useful, but that's not enough. So I'm going to leave it off. Let's see what's next. We've got background image. What if we were to turn that off? Getting closer. We still have to scroll down. So now this is interesting, and this is where a lot of people get frustrated, because you think, I turned off one image, I turned off the color, but wait, there's another one here. So let's turn that one off. Aha! Now, why would it be that we've got these multiple duplicate things? Well, the reason is simple. Sometimes there are actually two places in a theme where a particular class may be affected. In other words, there may be style that's being applied not only from one style sheet, but from a second. And when you turn off the original instance or the original style sheet instance, there may still be a second one there. So the only thing to be taking away from this, which is important, is use your inspector tool in order to determine what exactly it is that you need to change and make sure you test it so that we use the right syntax. So here, let's talk about what if we wanted to change this from a sort of gray color, Sandy calls it a dark brown, to something else. Let's use a really bold color like a red, for example. If I was just to change the background color and type in red, that's there, but it's not enough. Remember from what I just showed you, we're going to have to go farther. We're going to have to modify or get rid of the background image. So for example, here, I could change the colors that are here that are a transitional inside of the background image. But instead of that, I'm going to show you what happens if I just turn it off altogether. So for background image, I'm going to type in none. Now, what I just did is I effectively killed or blocked the original application of background image color and style from either the child theme before or from the parent theme. And if I wanted to do that, that would still allow me to change the other attribute, the background color, because the background image by itself had colors. When I remove that, now it sees the actual pure image that I'm applying via this, the background color. So let's say if we change that to green or blue. Okay, so I'm going to review this again because I know it's kind of tricky. It's two different attributes being applied to the menu element here, right? The class of menu. One is a foreground, I shouldn't say foreground. One is a background color and one is a background image. But the author of the original theme didn't just leave an image like a traditional image that has a URL. The image was actually a gradient that was linear from this particular hexadecimal color to this one. And that's the chocolate color or the dark sort of gray color that comes through and is overriding the background. By turning off the background image by using the attribute of none, I allow the foreground, I shouldn't say foreground again, I said it again, I allow the background color to be visible without being affected by any background image. I've always found this mysterious. I don't know why Emil originally did it this way because it drives so many people crazy. I think the reason had a lot to do with making sure that he got full compliance across all browsers, but it does confound people all the time. So if your goal is to change the color of this menu, we're going to first of all start by adding this particular attribute. I'm going to do a copy here and then I'm going to clean up the code. I'm going to copy this. We're going to want to add for the menu class the background image of none. So I'm going to go back in my admin dashboard under the appearance custom CSS and now I'm going to type in the menu class and I've got the first bracket there, so I'm going to add now a second bracket to close it off. And then what I want to make sure of is I want to get rid of that middle line. So now what I've got is two attributes. Background color blue, background image none. So that's going to override the previous linear gradient. Let's see what happens when I save it and refresh. And it sticks. So now we know we're in good stead. We can do anything we want. We can add any kind of color we want. And I want to show you another tool. So if I was on Sandy's site, I've used this in another video. There's lots of tools you can use, but one of them I showed you before is this one here. When you click on it, it's called colorpeak.com. This will pull all of the colors out of any particular URL you are on in the browser. So I went to Sandy's page and I already installed this extension inside, the ColorPeak extension of Chrome. I'm able to see the entire palette of colors. So let's say I want to make the menu something that looks good with her colors. I could just go ahead right here and choose this color here, although it's an RGB. So let's select hexadecimal. And now I'm going to take this color here in hexadecimal, BE495F, and I'm going to change that blue, which is just a placeholder, and use this nice kind of off red. Okay, when I'm done, I'm going to reload the page. Look at that. Now I've got a pretty neat color that, you know, would go nicely maybe with the rest of Sandy's site. Next is I want to go ahead and maybe get rid of that rollover. Now, this is interesting too because we're going to have the same problem. We have a background image, no doubt, as well as the background color. So when I'm rolled over, I right-click and inspect. Sometimes this can get a little trickier, but you just have to bear with me because when you're on a rollover, the state might be effectively different. In other words, when I want to inspect it, I put my mouse over it and I right-click and I say Inspect Element. But that doesn't necessarily bring up the rollover state over here. In other words, it doesn't show me what it's going to look like or what's the CSS that's causing the change for the rollover. So what I'm going to do is get into this area and I'm going to look for something that I know to be the case. When you move your mouse over a link item, an anchor tag item, it's called a hover state. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here for the main navigation menu item and the anchor tag, which is menu A. A stands for anchor tag. I'm going to click on the original style sheet because I know that the way most of the CSS is written, the hover state is going to be very nearby. So when I scroll down, sure enough, right below the main menu's anchor tag CSS is the hover state CSS. Main menu, the class of menu, anchor tag for the hover state. And here we've got the same thing. Look, we got all those background images, right, to contend with. So let's do the same thing we just did. We're going to steal this CSS. We're going to copy it. Oops, actually, we can do better. We're going to copy it like this. Now we're going to move it over to our custom CSS area. We're going to do the same thing we just did. We're only going to keep what we need, and we're going to modify it the way we want it. So I'm going to say, let's just start out by keeping the CSS the same for the color of the background. And we're going to get rid of all this extra stuff, except for that. We're going to leave one other attribute in place, which is color. Now we're going to get rid of the background image, just like we did before. Okay, so what have I got here before I show you the result? What I've done is I've cleaned this up. So I've got the original menu styling. Then I've got what happens when you roll your mouse over one of those anchor tag items, one of those links. We're going to say the background color will stay the same. The background image is going to be gone. We're not going to have that change into that dark gray, but we're going to change the color of the anchor tag text to FFFFF, which is all white. Let's see what happens. I'm going to save it. Go back here. I'm going to reload. This may or may not actually work. Okay. Now we've got the baseline, and there's one other one I have to change, which is the home. I'll show you that in a second. We've got the baseline to do something interesting. So let's say we want to make the color of the background change to something from the palette from Sandy's site. Maybe you want to do just a subtle difference. So maybe we're going to make it change to, well, we can make it go to blue. That'd be kind of garish. Let's go to this. Let's go to the next color over. So now I'm going to change the hover state to this hexadecimal color. I'm going to update the CSS. And now, once that loads, I'm going to reload the page. Let's see what happens now. Look at that. Pretty slick, right? It's very subtle, and it works. Now, there's one thing I have to contend with here is that the home has a different CSS. So I'm going to inspect that, see what the story is. And we see that there's something called a first child. Let's double check we're on the right thing. Inspect. And what happens is whenever you've got a menu, sometimes you're going to have one unique item. And I just want to make sure, actually, I almost have to check here because I'm going to move my mouse here. This is actually more likely is the current page item. So it's not the first child. It's actually here. Front page, which is where we're at, menu, which is what we're in, then it's got the class of current page item. And what's happened here is that the background color has been made transparent. It's kind of the same result as using none. Let's turn that off for a second. Okay. Then what happens is when I turn off that background color, this default state shows up, which has a background color which is very dark. And again, there's even more. There's a third time it's instantiated. And even a fourth time. So this could go on for a while. So let's just go right to the heart of it. Let's go when we want to the front page menu item A, background color. And let's add that in, and let's force it to have the same color as when we're hovering over it, because I think that's going to be much easier for us to deal with. So what we're going to do is copy this. And now what I've got is I've got a different instance where it's got current page item A. This means that the class is saying this is the page that we're on. It's got an additional class added to that menu item, and we're going to do one other thing. We're going to add hover, because we want to change this when we're in the hover state so that it doesn't show the black or whatever that is, maybe the transparent. We want it to be the same when we're hovering over. So let's reload and hope for the best. I know I'm going a little fast. Don't worry, I'm going to back up on this, so even if I'm sort of going too fast for you, you don't have to worry. I'm going to give you the final result when I'm done. I'm just waiting for this to save. Okay, good. And let's reload. Let's hope for the best. See if I got it the first time. Okay. Oh, and I did. So let's go over it again. Now I've got a situation where we have all the menu items acting uniformly when I roll over. I have a nice subtle change using the colors that we stole from Sandy's own palette. And let's review what I just did. Remember, we basically made sure that the main menu itself, the whole navigation thing, the bar, had a background color here, and that the background image, that funky linear gradient, was suppressed. Next, we changed the rollover or hover state for the anchor tags that are all making up the links on this menu. Right, these here. And what we did is we made sure that the background color was just slightly different from Sandy's palette. We suppressed the background image, and we also made sure, although this is kind of unnecessary, but I'm going to show you a trick with it in a second, that the text color was white. And then lastly, we had that unusual home menu, which acted independently because it had an extra class which said it's the current page item. And this is added dynamically. This is added by some JavaScript that's part of the theme that senses what page you are on, and it knows that you're on the home page, and it adds the additional CSS. Now, this is handy because, for example, if we were to go to the About page or something else, we might very well want it to have a unique highlight to just demonstrate that we're on that particular page. So don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that you need to suppress the current page item styling from the menu. I'm just trying to show you how you will identify it. Now, lastly, I left you this one little tidbit here. Remember, I said color FFF. Let's do something crazy. What if we want to make the color of the text change when we roll over? Well, we know we've got some colors here in the palette, and let's just pick this one here, 333. And you don't have to use these colors. This is just by way of example. Let's change the hover state color of the menu item text. Let's see what that does. Okay, so I've saved that. Let's reload this page. Now let's see what happens when I roll my... Hey, look at that. Get a little extra oomph, right? Because now the text changes. That stands out. In fact, you could just do that instead of doing the background if you wished. Now there's some other things that I'm not really fond of here, which in the flat design world we live in bother me. I don't like the text shadow. So what I'm going to do here is add one little change. I'm going to inspect this, and I'm going to look for text shadow inside of the menu class anchor tag CSS. I see it right here. I'm going to make that 0, 0, 0. And you'll notice that there's no longer on the actual normal state any text shadow. So let's go ahead and copy this over. And we're going to go back here. And we're going to do for the regular menu. I want to make sure of something. Notice that this is menu A. So we're going to have to add one more thing in here. We're going to do menu A. We're going to put our 2 brackets in. And we're going to say text shadow 0. Then we're going to do the same for the hover state so that that likewise has no text shadow. So I added in the normal state of the anchor tag for any link in the menu. And I'm going to reload, and let's see how we did. You'll notice there's no text shadow, and even when I roll over, the color changes, but there's no text shadow there. I'm going to do it one last tweak because that's a really strong statement. I'm going to go from a 333 to, I'm going to go to maybe like a 5858. See how that looks. I'm going to save that, and I'll reload here as soon as that saves. And let's see, much nicer, a little more subtle. Okay, so let's review what we've done today. We've learned how to hide a menu by either changing inside of the appearance menus area, the locations, and this works for everything except for in the responsive theme, the main header menu you cannot hide, because even if you hide it or don't assign anything to it, it's going to show you the default. We then showed you how to change the CSS either by using the child theme with the editor under LabZip Custom CSS in this case, and adding in CSS here, or with any parent or child theme by adding a custom plugin, the simple custom CSS plugin, which allows you to have a perpetual CSS override sheet. And here's where we added the style sheet stuff that allowed us to modify the colors as well. So we showed you first how to hide the menu and then how to change the colors or the other styling. And that's what we did here. We changed it from that sort of grayish black linear gradient to something that matches the palette. I also threw in a little colorpeak.com as a suggestion for a way that you can grab the color palette from any website you like and then have all the RGB or hexadecimal colors that you want in order to add them in. And lastly, the CSS that I put in here demonstrates the 4 key things that you'll probably need for your homepage. You're going to have your menu itself. You're going to have the regular state, non-rolled over menu items, the anchor tags. So in this case, I just removed the text shadows. We're going to have the hover state over any of those anchor tags, the links on the main menu. And then lastly, I showed you that there's one special class that shows the current page item. And in particular, I wanted to affect the hover state so that when I roll my mouse over it, in this case, it was the front page menu, that this is what happens. Now, if you're going to use that on other pages, you can get away with doing this. Just remove that, and now it's for any current page item when you roll over it. This would apply to any page, not just the front page. And I saved that, and everything was groovy. And the net result is what you see here. So hopefully this has helped Sandy, and it's helped the rest of you with a little bit of a preview of how quickly and easily, using some basic free tools, right? In this case, it's funny because I told you about using the FTP editor and everything else in the client, but we didn't even use it here. We just used the built-in WordPress stuff. But this is how fast and easy it can be to modify anything inside of the responsive LabZip child theme, or for that matter, the responsive theme itself, if you use a plugin like Custom CSS or Simple Custom CSS. So hopefully you guys will have some questions. You can always reach me over at 1wd.tv support. So /support, or click the support tab. Otherwise, I will definitely be doing more videos like this on how to modify the responsive theme and or the responsive LabZip child theme. Until then, this is Spence, the evil genius. I'll see you next time.